The Phoenix Mercury have been busy in free agency. Who's in, who's out, and what does it all mean? Locked On Women's Basketball starts now.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and happy Friday. You are Locked On to Women's Basketball. I'm Natalie Heavren, and I'm a features writer and the Atlantic 10 beat reporter for The Next. Today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Today, we'll be chatting all about the Phoenix Mercury's free agency moves, including the 4-team trade that sent Satou Sabally and Alyssa Thomas to the desert, who is no longer on the team, and what to be excited about this upcoming season. Joining me today is The Next's Phoenix Mercury beat writer, Tia Reid. So at the start of free agency, there was a 4-team trade that shook up the WNBA, including the Phoenix Mercury. But before we break it all down, I just want to discuss who the Mercury acquired and traded away. So Phoenix received Satou Sabally, Kalani Brown, Sevgi Uzun from the Dallas Wings, as well as Alyssa Thomas from the Connecticut Sun. The Mercury traded away the reserved rights of Makia Herbert-Harrigan, the number 12 and number 19 picks in the 2025 draft, Sophie Cunningham, Rebecca Allen, and Natasha Cloud. Okay, so now that we've got all that, and we'll talk way more about this. Tia, were you expecting a blockbuster trade like this? And how do you think the newcomers are going to fit in the team and with the players still on the team?
Yeah, I mean, I really wasn't expecting it. I mean, the Alyssa Thomas trade, or when it was reportedly 2 separate trades, and Alyssa Thomas came first, that was in like a random Tuesday. And, I'm a college student, so I'm in class. I think I was working on homework, waiting to go to my next class. And then all of a sudden, it's like the Mercury just got one of the best available players in this free agency period. And then I think Satou Sabally being a part of that deal was even more of a surprise, because I think a lot of the conversation prior had been, oh, is Satou going to go play with her sister? And then Sabrina's also on that team, and they're, played at Oregon together. So there was a lot that was kind of hinting at Satou going to New York, and then boom, she ends up in Phoenix too. So both of those players coming down here was pretty surprising to me, but I think it'll go well in terms of their integration into the team. I think they both can be pretty versatile players, which is something that Nate Tibbetts worked with a lot last year, and I think fits well with kind of the theme that Phoenix has going on.
Yeah, there is nothing like being a college student and covering free agency. I remember 4-minute drive to campus, and DeWanna Bonner was traded to the Sun. Our internal Slack blew up. There were 40 messages. I was like, all I did was pull out of my driveway, go on a road for a quarter mile, and turn into the campus. What are we talking about? So just all of these unexpected things that happen at what seems like the worst moment for you as a student. I completely understand. You attended Satou Sabally's introductory press conference. What were some of the highlights of the afternoon, and what did she have to say about Phoenix?
Yeah, so it was a nice setup. Obviously, they were over at their practice facility, which is a great facility. And they kind of harped on, how Satou fits into that versatility. Like I said, talking about how she can play multiple positions on the floor, how she can do multiple different things on the floor. There's also obviously that moment where, Kalia Copper asked her a question. She's like, who's your favorite teammate to play with? Who's going to be your favorite teammate to play with? Is that it's obviously Ka. And then along with that, you have, why she chose Phoenix. Nick Urin, the Mercury's GM, he had said, this is something that they've been trying to make happen for 2 years, that they had talked to her last year when she was a restricted free agent, and she went back to Dallas. And so they were hoping that they could get her this year. And obviously they did. And so there was a lot of good stuff in Tuesday's press conference.
Yes, and make sure you go to thenexthoops.com to check out Tia's story on that. What part of Sabally's game are you most excited to watch or think will fit best with the team?
Honestly, I think Sabally is an exciting player just to watch all around with everything that she can do. her ability to score the ball is pretty incredible. But I honestly think something that I most excited to see with this Phoenix team, with how Nate Tibbetts coaches, is her shooting, because it's obvious that's been something that she's kind of worked on in the last couple of years. This past season, yes, she only played 15 games, but still shot a career high 3-point field goal percentage. And Nate Tibbetts has said time and time again that that's his goal for this team. He wants them to shoot a lot of threes. And so with that being one of the things that Sabally's worked on, that'll fit right in with what he wants, and getting those threes up and hitting that 30 to 43 pointers a game mark.
Yes. And pivoting to the other big acquisition, someone who does not shoot a lot of threes. I've covered Alyssa Thomas for a couple of years as a beat writer, and then more sporadically in recent years while I've been living in Connecticut. So I've seen her excellence live quite a few times. You know, while she may not fit in that 3-point shooting, what part of her game are you most excited to see, or think will fit in really well with the team?
Yeah, no, you're correct. She definitely, 3-point shooting is not her thing, but she obviously provides a lot of value in other ways. And one thing that I'm looking forward to seeing from Alyssa Thomas is her really being that presence kind of in the paint and using that strength that she has down in the post. I love a good post player that can play with their back to the basket, and that is Alyssa Thomas. And so I think having her in the paint, being able to pass out of the paint, allows you for a few different options. You can, if you have Kalia Copper, you can set up an offense where there's a lot of drives to the paint and kicking out to the 3-point line. If you're able to swing the ball around with Alyssa Thomas being in the paint, you can kick it down to Alyssa Thomas, and she obviously is really good at finding players outside with shooters for 3-pointers. So you have options with Alyssa Thomas playing, and so that's something that I'm excited to see. And she can also go get her own by being one of the best forwards in the league.
Yeah, definitely. And, how do you think these acquisitions are going to help compensate for the losses in players like Sophie Cunningham, Rebecca Allen, Natasha Cloud, and then also, and we'll get into this more in segment 2, but Brittany Griner and Monique Billings, who have both left the team. Griner signing with Atlanta, and then Monique Billings being picked in the expansion draft. How do you think these two will kind of help fill those gaps?
Yeah, basically Alyssa Thomas on her own replaces the rebounding production that you got from Brittany Griner. Brittany Griner is obviously an amazing player, but if there's kind of anything to knock against her, she's not the strongest rebounder, at least not that you would expect from someone who's 6'8", 6'9", right? And so Alyssa Thomas comes in, and she was averaging, I think it was 8.4 rebounds a game this past season. Already you replace what you lose from Griner rebounding wise. And then as far as the shooting, Satou Sabally can come in and she can shoot. I think you added Sammy Whitcomb. Sammy Whitcomb can shoot the ball as well. And so that shooting production that you maybe lose from an outside perspective from Sophie Cunningham, from Rebecca Allen, you kind of find it within those two players. Same thing with that length. Satou Sabally is very long, maybe not as strong of a defender in theory as Rebecca Allen, but Sabally was talking about defense in her introductory press conference on Tuesday. So that's obviously something that she's looking to kind of put a focus on while she's here in Phoenix. The one thing that you didn't really replace is Natasha Cloud. You didn't end up with as strong of a caliber as a point guard in this deal. So that's the one thing that that kind of left them in the red instead of the green here.
Yeah, and we'll definitely talk about that more in our next segment. And you are absolutely correct. We cannot forget about the Phoenix Mercury signing 2-time WNBA champion Sammy Whitcomb. What does she bring to the team, especially as a player that has a lot of experience in the league and has a lot of experience winning championships?
Yeah, I think the way that this team is kind of set up right now, I think they want to win as soon as possible. They want to win this year. Obviously, you're bringing everyone in. The new CBA is going to come in after this season. A lot of players are going to be changing teams. It looks like they want to win now. And so you bring in someone who has experience. that can kind of help you get to that level. But also, you don't actually have a point guard. Whitcomb has played a little bit more in the last couple of seasons, so she brings a little bit of experience there to help out. Obviously, she is a shooter and can add benefit from that aspect. So you have another veteran presence, another veteran guard presence. Depending on how you choose to play it out, it maybe allows you to bring Sevgi Uzun and Celeste Taylor off the bench rather than potentially having to start one of them. But it doesn't solve the point guard problem.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll break down more about, what the team lost and what roles will need to be filled in their absence, as well as take a look at what chemistry or what you think the chemistry will look like for the team next season. Today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privileges of the very privileged are no longer exclusive. With Robinhood Gold, your annual IRA contributions are boosted by 3%. Plus, you also get 4% APY on your cash and non-retirement accounts. That's over 8 times the national savings average. The perks of the high net worth are now available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive your 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate subject to change. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold at $5 a month for 1 year from first match. Must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to robinhood.com/boost. Over 8 times the national average savings account interest rate claim is based on data from the FDIC as of November 18th, 2024. Robinhood Financial, LLC, member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. Okay, so just to recap, if our listeners, or even for myself, that have gotten a little confused in the last 7 minutes that we've been talking, so it's a lot to keep track of. The Mercury traded away the reserved rights of Mikia Herbert-Harrigan, the number 12 and number 19 picks of the 2025 draft, Sophie Cunningham, Rebecca Allen, and Natasha Cloud. And then, as I mentioned before, Brittany Griner signed with the Atlanta Dream, and Monique Billings was selected by the Golden State Valkyries in the expansion draft. Deep breath. That is a lot. Let's start big picture. 5 of Phoenix's top 7 scorers from last season, measured by points per game, are no longer on the team. Whose presence or skill set are going to be missed the most?
That's a tough one. I think, obviously, what Brittany Griner is able to do, I said she's not the strongest rebounder, but offensively, she's still a huge asset. And Phoenix's ability to play when she came back from missing those first 10 games last year was completely different. So she was a game changer for them in a way. And like I said, being able to get the ball inside quickly by passing it inside and being able to kick it out for 3-point shots had a big effect on Phoenix's gameplay. So I think they're going to miss Griner. I think they're going to miss Cloud. You don't have a point guard, especially how much Natasha Cloud talked about her relationship with Nate Tibbetts and kind of being that extension of him on the floor. That's what she said her role as a point guard was. You don't have that. And while I think the franchise likes Celeste Taylor a lot, and I think she has a lot to add defensively, I think she needs work offensively, and I don't know that she would have gotten there in one off season. Sevgi Uzun is just, I think you saw her kind of lose minutes as the season went along with Dallas, and so I think she brings veteran presence in that she's played a lot of years overseas and Europe. But as far as what she's done in the WNBA side, I think it's just kind of, okay, it's just kind of a body to kind of fill a roster spot. They signed her to a training camp contract. So whereas Kalani Brown came over in that deal and was signed to the team, and I think they picked up that her deal that was a protected deal from Dallas. Uzun's just on a regular training camp contract. So they're not necessarily sure about her either. So it's kind of interesting there and what they lost and how they're trying to make up for that.
And then, what are the challenges in just bringing in so many new pieces and losing 5 of those top 7 scorers as of right now, because in that equation is Diana Taurasi. So maybe we should start with that. Do we know what's going to happen with Diana Taurasi this season right now?
Yeah, so I don't know anything for sure. My kind of, I guess, theory or assumption, the fact that Brittany Griner left, to me, says that Diana is probably not coming back. I think if she were going to return for a 21st season, she would have had a conversation with Griner, been like, hey, I'm coming back. And I could easily have seen a situation where Griner says, okay, let's run it back, one more year. If you've got one more in you, let's do it together one more time. And then if she wanted to test free agency, that could be her chance. I think the fact that Griner not only announced that she was going to explore free agency and then went and signed somewhere else, I think is really a proving factor that Diana probably is not coming back this next season. If she is, I think that'll also help with your guard play, but I wouldn't hold my breath.
Yeah, I mean, with that kind of up in the air, Phoenix will only be returning 1 or 2 of their top 7 scorers from last season. Going back to my original question, before we got a little off track, what are the challenges with losing so much and really only having 1 or 2 key pieces of the top of the rotation coming back?
Yeah, you mentioned it earlier. It's the chemistry thing. And that was a big question for Phoenix last season because they also brought in a few top pieces. And it was like, can all these players play together with Natasha Cloud, with Kalia Copper, and Beck Allen when she was on the floor? And that was something that they did kind of struggle with. It was like, hey, this team is still playing together, playing all starting 5 together. When you had the injuries, BG was out and then Beck Allen was out. The starting 5 really didn't get a whole lot of chances to gel before you got into that latter part of the season. So that's kind of the big challenge here is, will all these players be able to kind of figure each other out quickly through training camp, through these first couple of games without taking any really bad losses? And, I'm sure they're hoping to pick up wins in those first couple of games of the season, but be able to figure each other out in a productive way, I think is going to be one of the biggest challenges.
And then, we haven't seen the Mercury make a lot of picks in recent years. What statement did they make by trading away the team's first and second round picks in the upcoming draft?
Yeah, I said it earlier. It's giving the sense that they're in win now mode. They're not worried about taking, someone young to kind of reinvigorate the franchise. Following the departure of Brittany Griner and the potential departure of Diana Taurasi, that's not what they're concerned about, at least not in this year's draft. They want to win a championship. I think also on top of that, you get Satou Sabally. You don't know if it's a long-term situation, but if you can turn it into one, I mean, this is only going to be her 6th year in the league, so that's another player who could become, your new face of the franchise. And if you're able to keep her happy and keep her here. But yeah, everything that, that trade kind of dealt, it's saying that if the Mercury don't win a championship this year, they haven't met their goal.
Yeah, and I think that is definitely a really good point. And you mentioned this before about kind of the new CBA expected to be impacting the 2026 season. We don't know what's going to happen after this year. No idea. So with a lot of players signing 1-year deals and all of that, is that going to be something that the Phoenix Mercury might regret in the future? Is not, and maybe not even this year, but also in years past, not having those picks to kind of develop a young core?
Truthfully, I mean, it could be. I think it kind of just depends on, we don't even know for sure who's going to be coming out of this year's draft. Several of the top players that are mocked to the first round have another year of eligibility in the unlikely circumstance that all of them decide to stay in college, right? Your first round looks completely different. And by the time you're getting to that bottom of the first round, that 12th overall pick where Phoenix would have picked, your options might not be looking great. It might not even be players that, have a high chance of actually making the roster. I mean, we saw Phoenix, they got lucky, and Charisma Osborne fell to them in the 3rd round last year. And even then, granted, she was cut because they needed another forward because of Brittany Griner's injury coming out of training camp. But even then, coming off, she's on training. They weren't feeling super strong about her, and that was their one pick from last year. And that was someone who was projected to go much higher than the 3rd round and still couldn't stick around. So it's a tough thing. It might be different, though, with the league expanding. Obviously, there is more opportunities for more players to make teams. And so that could be a thing where it's like, okay, players that wouldn't have made the league in the past now are making the team because you have these expanded roster spots. So a long way to say I don't know, but I think those are some of the factors that play in.
Awesome. Well, coming up next, we'll take a look at what Tia's looking forward to this season. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Looking for tickets to your next big event, whether it's a concert, a comedy show, or a sporting event, finding the right ticket at the right price can be a headache. But with Game Time Picks, it's never been easier. With Game Time Picks, the app does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals, so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. I've been using Game Time Picks for a while now, and the seat view feature is a game changer. Before I even hit buy, I can see exactly what my seat will look like in the venue. You're also covered with Game Time's lowest price guaranteed. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Before we get into all the fun stuff, are there any other moves that you're expecting from the Mercury before the end of free agency?
I don't know that there's any names attached to anything that I'm expecting. Nick Urin did say that filling out, kind of their benching, their reserves is going to be the next step, which obviously makes a lot of sense. I did a quick scan of some players who are available. I really hammered home this point guard point, but I do really think it's important. And so, someone who's available like an Erica Wheeler, who's a veteran point guard coming off of, she didn't get the most minutes in Indiana. She played in college with Kalia Copper and has been, in the league for so long. That's someone who can help provide some value there that I would be, depending on what her price point is, because Phoenix also has a lot of money, but it's a question of, is that the type of contract that she deserves? I'd be interested to see if that's someone that maybe is on their target list, or if there's someone else, if they're looking at a few international players. So I think they also could use another reserve forward or two. So definitely don't think they're done picking up players. How big of name players, we'll see.
So you're not expecting another blockbuster 4-team trade to send the league into a hurricane?
I don't have it in me to be jolted out of whatever state I'm in to see that reporting again. And I just don't know what assets Phoenix has left to deal that aren't, years of draft picks down the line or trading any promising talent. I had mentioned it. I was surprised that they were able to put this deal together and keep Celeste Taylor as a young talent that could be instrumental, especially Dallas traded away all their other point guards. We know why, but even still not wanting to keep someone like a JC Sheldon on the roster and dealing everyone else that kind of played in your backcourt aside from Arike Ogunbowale. I would be surprised at that. I was surprised that they wouldn't have wanted to bring her in. Connecticut has basically cleared house. They got Natasha Cloud, but I wouldn't have been surprised if they wanted someone else to come in behind her too. So the fact that they were able to keep Celeste Taylor was impressive to me, just based off how much Phoenix kind of used her, especially when the injury started to hit late.
And then, we've talked about chemistry. How are you feeling about the potential for the team chemistry this season? Excited, unsure, a little bit of both?
Yeah, I think there's kind of a mixture. I think, you have, because everyone's so excited to play together, I think you have the possibility that you could see a situation where, they come in and they click instantly. I think you have Kalia Copper is obviously excited to play with Satou Sabally, and Satou's excited to play with her. I think they're both excited to play with Alyssa Thomas. Just thinking about, kind of the energy that some of these players kind of project off the field. Alyssa Thomas has dealt with youthful players that seem to get on her nerves in Connecticut, so I'm sure she'll have a great time dealing with someone as energetic as Satou. But no, I think they'll be able to get along. I think there's less questions about that than there were when Phoenix made all their moves last season about, will this team click? I think just based off what we've seen, and Unrivaled kind of helps with this, right? And seeing these players interact with each other in ways that we wouldn't have before. We're like, oh, okay, so-and-so is friends, and, these players do like each other. So I think we're kind of seeing that with Thomas and Sabally and Copper.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have to see if there's anyone following Alyssa Thomas around trying to get her on camera like Dejanay Carrington had been during Unrivaled. Listeners, if you haven't gone and found those clips, I think it was, at least one of them was Dejanay Carrington trying to figure out how everyone says aunt or aunt, trying to figure out that divide. And Alyssa Thomas did not want to be involved and was pulled in. So that's a little bit of what Tia was mentioning. So you've talked about this and you wrote about this a little bit. Do you think these moves make the Mercury a title contender?
I think they're almost there. I think they're probably now up into a space where they're a top 5 team in the league, or at least they kind of should be. I'm trying to go through and think. I'm like, we have New York is still great. Vegas is great. I think Seattle is still going to be good. Indiana made some. Oh, yeah. So, I mean, getting into that top 5 is going to be hard. But I think, you have, if Satou Sabally stays healthy, I think you probably set the expectation this is the top 5 team. I think, like we just said, there's so much talent. It makes it hard to say, for sure, this team is now a contender. I think the other thing that kind of is a reservation for me in that is that I think Nate Tibbetts is still kind of adjusting to life in the WNBA. Last year was his first season. This being his second season now with a completely new roster and a completely different kind of level of talent, I think that's another step of adjustment for him where it might not be something that clicks right away. And so that's the other reason why I think this kind of selling everything out to win now is a little concerning potentially for Phoenix, because if it doesn't click, you don't know if you're going to get it all back. So I don't know that I would say they're a contender yet. We'll see if what other moves they bring in to kind of fill out their bench, because that's another aspect that's kind of keeping them from being a contender. But I just don't know yet. I have to see it to believe it.
Okay, maybe a better question, since we are only less than a full week into free agency. Do you think the Mercury have positioned themselves to be in the conversation for a title contender, maybe that we're looking at down the road?
I think you can say that. I think so. I think this is a roster that so far it looks like it's being built to try to win a title. And so when we see them play their first couple of games, I think they could meet expectations, and I think they could surpass them, and expectations are pretty high. So I wouldn't be surprised with either of those outcomes if they come out looking really good in these first couple of games and kind of reset their standard of like, okay, maybe this team can compete with, the reigning champions and the Lynx and the Aces that kind of make up that upper echelon right now.
And then last question, I know the season is still more than 3 months away, but what is most exciting to you about this upcoming season for the Mercury?
I think just everything. I think it's new energy. I think you've had a franchise where you've had the same people at the forefront of it for so long. And so now you're kind of in this era where, Matt Ishbia and his team are investing so much into the Mercury and the women's side of the game. You saw the new practice facility that they built, like everything that they've kind of put in on the business side is now translating over to, the player side and the work and the on court side. And so you're seeing these new players come in. People want to come to Phoenix to play. And I think it's just, like I said, it's new energy. It's Alyssa Thomas and Satou Sabally instead of Brittany Griner and potentially Diana Taurasi. It's just newness. And that's so exciting. It's like a curiosity thing. It's like, I don't know what this is going to look like, but I really want to find out. And so that's how I feel about this season's Phoenix Mercury. It's like, I have no idea how this is going to go, but I think it's going to be exciting to watch anyways.
Yeah, I will be staying up way past my bedtime on the East Coast to watch the Phoenix Mercury. I can already tell. Well, thank you for joining me today, Tia. Where can the people find you and your work?
Yeah, so I'm on X as Tia Reid 65. Man, I wish I knew my Blue Sky handle off the top of my head, but I'm on there too. If you go to the next Blue Sky page, on my articles that I've written, I'm tagged on there too. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining me, and thanks to our listeners for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. And make sure to tune in tomorrow to hear from our WNBA draft crew, and every week, Monday through Saturday, for more women's basketball coverage.